Okay, so our walk cycles were pretty good. I liked looking at them. If we were to travel over into the week 8 module inside of Canvas, let's just look at it real fast together. Bum, bum, bum. Our homework this week is a run. Yay! Okay, runs are a whole lot of fun, right? And I think we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about the runs as we get closer to the conclusion of class today. But runs are a great, great opportunity for us to experiment and invent, right? Runs are a lot of fun because unlike the walk, runs only have one foot on the ground at a time, right? If you think about it in the walk cycle, there are many, many, many frames when both feet are touching the ground at the exact same time. In a run cycle, never the case. Both feet are never on the ground, okay, at the exact same time. You can see that pretty quickly with the simple illustration that I provided you from our book. So we'll come back and we'll talk about the details of the run and some considerations that you need to keep in mind when crafting the run for your character, okay? I wanted to begin our conversation today about After Effects. One of the problems that we've had since day one in here is exporting out our animations in a way that ensures that we get the absolute correct playback speed, okay? And in a format that we can easily share on the web, and it gets us inside of a traditional film production pipeline. We're never, out there in the real world, you're never ever going to be producing GIFs, for a professional film or to be cut into a much larger project. We're almost always going to need to be able to produce video files, and Animate is really not built to do that easily, at least. In addition, going forward in the future, we want to start adding new elements inside of our timelines that allows us to create music and sound effects. There are some other animation kind of benefits of going into After Effects that will help us create backgrounds and maybe even do some foreground animation. Point being is that we want to start introducing kind of the rest of the ecosystem. We can't have blinders on in our world. For us as animators, we don't live, I'm jealous wholesale of my colleagues in the graphic design business, right? Because with them, they just need to know Photoshop and or Illustrator. That's it. You just need to know one app and you're good to go. You can do everything you need to do in Illustrator as a graphic designer. Well, that's not the case for us here in the animation world. For animators, we have to know literally probably about a half a dozen different applications. Because in our world, we have a pipeline, and each step of the pipeline usually is a different app. We try to have, as much as we can in the professional animation world, we try to choose the right tool for the job, okay? There are no super tools, even though Adobe from time to time would let you believe that Photoshop is that super tool, but it's really not, right? Photoshop, it drives me crazy what Photoshop does, right? You can do video editing in Photoshop, but why would you do video editing in Photoshop? Why? You have an entire dedicated app built by professionals, for professionals, that's purpose-built for video editing. Why would you want to do it in Photoshop, right? The results are always going to be not as good. It's going to take you twice as long, and it's going to be pretty subpar, right? Same with 3D modeling. I don't get why you can do 3D modeling in Photoshop. That does not compute for me, right? Does not, especially when we have dedicated 3D modeling apps whose sole function is to do 3D modeling, right? It's all about finding the right tool for the job. As they say, you can hammer a nail with your shoe, right? You can do it. It's possible. It's very possible to hammer a nail with your shoe, but would you want to do it? Yeah. What? Right. Probably. Yeah, you could do it. You could do it. It's going to destroy the shoe, and it's going to take you 8 times as long, and the results are never going to be as good, right? So we want to make sure we're using the right tool for the job at every single stage of the game. Animate is a great, great tool for us to create 2D illustrated drawings, okay? Animated illustrated drawings. That's about it. That's all it's really, that's the extent of its function. It doesn't really produce video quality or cinematic quality results. So we want to start integrating our animations into After Effects. Now the first thing that we need to do is that we need to get our animations out of Animate, right? And we've actually gone over this a couple times before, but I want to revisit this idea, okay? What we need to do, and this is a project from an earlier class, okay? I like this animation. It's just a simple walk cycle. Gotta add sound effects in your brain, right? Pretty good little walk, okay? I like it a lot. It's 60 frames, pretty slow, and I want to get each one of these frames out of Animate and into a format that we now can start using in a professional video or filmmaking environment. Okay? Ideally, out there in the real world, we want to have each frame be its own drawing, its own image. We don't want to export out like a GIF, right, where all the frames have been saved into one mega video format. We want to work on what's called an image sequence. Okay? Let's just do it real fast. Let's get this animation out of Animate and into a format that can be used on literally every other application on the face of the planet. Okay? Image sequences are pretty universal. They're as close to an industry standard file format as we possibly can get. Let's just do it real fast. If the developers down at Adobe are listening to my live stream, they're likely not. They should fix this because it's kind of confusing. It's very misleading. The option that we want to use is export movie, but what we're exporting is not actually going to be a movie. It's going to be an image sequence where each frame of our animation timeline is saved into its own individual file format. Let's do it real fast. You're going to get the standard OS Finder, and I'm just going to put this on the desktop in a folder called Andy's Anim. There we go. And I'm going to save out not a JPEG sequence, a PNG sequence. JPEGs have a couple problems associated with this file format. First and foremost, they are compressed. They are super compressed. The quality of a JPEG image goes down very, very quickly. Not something that we really want to look towards, especially since we're trying to transfer data from one app over into another. In addition, JPEGs don't support transparency, right? So it's going to bake down whatever is inside of your stage into a completely rasterized, image with no transparent pixels even available to us, right? You'll see why this PNG sequence and its quality and transparency channels are superior here in a minute, but this is where we want to hang out, the PNG sequence. We're done with GIFs. We're definitely not going to do a Swift movie, right? This is a web-only video file. It's not even a video file. It's an animated image format, but we're going to use a PNG sequence, okay? Let's hit save. Look at this little dialog box. Just leave all the defaults as is, and let's hit export. Now what it's doing is going through my timeline, and it's saving each frame of my timeline. Here's the folder. Each frame of my timeline into its own image file, its own dedicated image file. This is called an image sequence. So here's frame 1. You can actually just hold down the arrow key and see the animation come. So every single frame is its own image file. Now, why do we choose to work with this in the professional world? Why is this the preferred method of working with files? I like it. If there's a problem with my animation, I don't have to go back into Animate. These are just picture files, right? I can go take them over into Photoshop or wherever and just make some individual corrections to each file versus having to go back to the raw animation file, which at a studio scale may not be available to you, right? So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility built into the system when working with image sequences, right? For us in the professional world, this is how every single file is created. We don't hand QuickTime movies around, okay? We don't hand AVI files around, and we certainly don't hand WMV files around either, right? Everything is going to be baked into its own image sequence, right? Because this is the simplest way to get data in and out of all these different applications, right? It also unpairs this animation from any sort of proprietary video format. If you think about it, the MOV video format or MP4 video format, that's proprietary technology that's licensed, okay? It really is. Someone else owns that video format. When we export out the PNG sequence, what we're ultimately exporting out are just pictures in a file format that's open source, okay? Which is pretty neat, okay? So no one can ever claim or have any sort of claim to the images that we create from Animate. They're now ours. We're not kind of participating inside of that video format world anymore, okay? For us in the 3D world, this is a really big time issue for us. We prefer to work in image sequences because here's how our rendering technology works, okay? Because when you guys get to GCOM 401 next semester, you'll see this in action, okay? Every single animation that we make is going to be rendered. Now, what's rendering? Does anyone know what rendering is? Yeah, it's when the computer takes over and physically draws a picture for us. How long does it take to render something? At times, very, very long. Okay. Now, I don't know what the numbers are now because Avatar, 9-foot blue monkey Avatar, not Airbender Avatar, right? Avatar changed the game. What James Cameron did on Avatar when it comes to the visual intensity and depth of the visuals that he created for that film is amazing. Love or hate the film, you have to respect the animation in it because it is top shelf. It really, really is. It's a beautifully animated film, wonderfully rendered. Okay, I'll close the door real fast. Okay, so for the longest time, the world record holder for the longest render per frame actually came from the Transformers franchise, the first Transformers movie, aka the good Transformers movie, because they've all been pretty bad after that, right? Unfortunately, although the new Bumblebee movie looks pretty good, I hope it lives up to what the trailer has produced. Anyways, in the first Transformers film, there's a really great shot in there. It's kind of an iconic shot. You know, the Autobots just land on Earth, they jump into their car forms, and they're going down that brick alleyway. You guys remember that shot? And at the end of the brick alleyway, there's Shia LaBeouf and what's her face? The chick that Megan Fox. I can't stand Megan Fox. Like, I'm really happy her acting career is over because I could not stand. I've never ever once enjoyed a single thing that she's done in any of her films. She's just a horrible actress, right? Anyways. So they get to, all 5 of the Autobots get down to the end of that alleyway, and what do? They transform, right? And they do, they do their hero animations with their hero models, their hero textures. The render camera is a couple feet away from all the computer graphics, so you see these Autobots big in frame, and they're going through all their transformations. It's a big epic pan and tilt like everything Michael Bay does, right? And of course, by the time we get to the apex of the pan and tilt, there's Optimus Prime transforming, and you see all the wheels and things flipping over, and then there's Optimus Prime, right? It's the first transformation that we see for the Autobots. That shot used to be the record holder for the longest render time per frame, because shiny metal things are just about the most difficult thing for the computer to render, right? And it has everything to do with reflections and how the light sources are interacting with the surfaces. It just takes a lot of computational energy to draw frames like that, right? And you have 5 Autobots filling the frame for a good 10 seconds or so, right? Does anyone want to take a guess as to how long it took ILM to render one frame of that shot? Longer than 6 hours. Longer than 15 hours. Yeah, 2 days. 2 days per frame. And they had like 300 of these things they had to render, right? So when we render out there in the real world at this cinema resolution, at this cinema quality, it takes a long time for even the best artists in the world to ask the computer to draw their images, right? So that what we do to ensure that we only have to draw those images one time, okay, is that we create image sequences. Here's how it actually works behind the scene. When you create an image sequence in any app, doesn't matter which one you do it in, the moment it's done creating that image sequence, it saves that image sequence to disk, okay? So you render frame 1, the moment it's done rendering frame 1, it creates the image, saves it permanently to disk, right? And then the computer advances on to frame 2, okay? And so on and so forth. When you render out a QuickTime movie, a video file, it saves each of the rendered frames in a temporary cache file. And then it only permanently writes that video file to disk at the conclusion of the render, okay? So if you're rendering 100 frames, you're not actually going to save something permanently to your hard drive until frame 100 is done, okay? Well, what happens if you run out of memory or the computer crashes during frame 95? You're screwed, right? Because you lose everything. You've lost all 95 of those frames. That's a temporary cache file. So once the computer crashes, they disappear, right? It's gone. You lose everything. Versus when you're rendering an image sequence, if the computer was to crash, you run out of RAM or something on frame 95, what would you have to render going forward? You got it, 95, 96, 97, 98, and 99. You just pick up right where you left off, okay? So it kind of saves what we've done. It's kind of our grand safety net when it comes to these renders. Because when you're working at that scale, at the cinema scale, you're only going to render these things maybe one time, okay? Maybe 2 times, okay? These renders cost a lot of money, and they actually bill the client for the renders that they do. This isn't like free stuff that they give away, right? They actually have render time that they bill their clients for, right? So this is a line item in the budget. So we have to be as close to that prediction as we possibly can when it comes to producing these frames, okay? In the good old film days, it was stupid expensive to take a digital image and put it on a piece of film, okay? So you only rendered these things, or you only did your render for the film out one time when you were done, right? Because it costs a tremendous amount of money to print a digital image onto a piece of 35mm film. Those days are gone. We don't do anything with actual film anymore. Even in theaters at the cinema, you're not actually seeing a projected cinema image anymore. It's all digital, right? I remember the first time I saw a digitally projected image, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy, right? It looks so crisp and so clear. It's interesting and that was like probably, what, 15, 16 years ago? And I remember it was, you knew the movie, right? For us, it was Star Wars Episode 1. And there was only a couple theaters in Northern California that were going to do a true digital projection of Star Wars Episode 1, right? Now, every cinema does digital projections. It's every day. We don't even think about it anymore, right? It's pretty great how far we've come in such a short amount of time. So these image sequences become a central part of our entire production pipeline, okay? It gets us out of any proprietary format, allows us to very quickly create an image that is immediately saved once it's created, and they're super easy to use. These are just pictures. They're not video files, so they become a little bit simpler to use on the back end. Now the big downside, as one can imagine, is what when working with image sequences? You got a lot of data now, right? Now I got 60 individual files that I now have to manage versus one GIF, right? So our media management skills need to be ratcheted up a little bit. Obviously, the big benefit, or the big suggestion, is just put everything in a folder. You know, we're still kind of, generally speaking, we're still managing a singular item. It's a folder instead of a video file now. So we want to get the contents of this folder, that image sequence, into After Effects, which is going to produce for us some nice added benefits, okay? We're going to be adding a whole bunch of stuff into our After Effects kind of repertoire, if you will, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, including the ability to do simple motion graphics, so titles, okay? Simple sound effects, music. We'll also be using After Effects to cut in a couple different shots, something that you're going to be expected to do for your final project in this class. This is not going to be an After Effects class. We have a dedicated class for that. It's GCOM 390, our motion graphics class. It's going on right now, so I definitely suggest you keep a weathered eye on the horizon for our next offering. If you're really into motion graphics, and you should be as animators, you'll definitely want to take a look at After Effects, okay? You're going to get a nice little taste of it in this class. And then we're actually going to explore some of the more character animation-driven tools in After Effects, stuff that I know they don't talk about in GCOM 390. So it should be a nice extension to our tool set here in GCOM 400. So let's open up the app. It's way down here at the bottom, After Effects. Okay, this is a biggie. This is a big app. It's as close to an industry standard app as we possibly can get. In the graphic design world, Photoshop and Illustrator are it. Those are the central digital hubs, if you will, of those workflow. Everything, at one point or another, inside of the graphic design and web design workflow is going to flow through Photoshop or Illustrator at one point or another, right? In the animation world, for us, our digital hub, our digital Swiss Army knife is After Effects, okay? Everything is going to flow through After Effects at one point or another. It's kind of that second tool. Okay, you have your animation package, and then you always have After Effects, right? You know, they complement each other very, very, very directly. Okay, Entire films, the visual effects and animation for entire films are done in this app. It's been around since the very, very, very beginning of the the digital animation industry in the early to mid 90s. Okay, at times it's going to feel like you're kind of going into a time warp. It's an old app with old kind of structures in tow, but I think you're going to find that once you kind of get used to working in this different environment, it's going to go pretty fast. Okay. So welcome to After Effects, your new home away from home. We're going to be spending a lot of time in After Effects over the next couple of weeks as we start to add layers of technology into our animation pipeline to give us something a little bit more cinematic than what Animate can give us. Okay. There's a couple different things that we need to look at first before we can start working and building our animation. Let me just take you on a small little tour of the interface real fast. It's pretty easy. The first thing, and the place that we're naturally going to begin, is this guy over here. This is the project bin, okay, or the project palette. This is going to be our library of assets that we then can load into any one of our compositions or any one of our animations in the app, okay? So think of this like a warehouse for stuff, okay? Whatever we want to go on our animation has to initially be imported or created over here inside of our project panel, okay? So this is the first stop on any project, is to create and import some assets. Well, we already have some assets that we want to bring into the application, okay? If you're following along, and I hope that you are, okay, you can do this on your own computer as well with the files that you have in front of you. For me, I'm going to use the animation that one of the students in the other class created, and I'm going to just import that image sequence in, okay? So importing content into After Effects is wicked easy. There's actually two ways you can do it. Naturally, with all things Adobe, just going File, Import. File is going to allow you to import files into the application. Now, I know you're probably saying, Pat, why not multiple files? I have 60 of these images that I need to bring in. Should I be doing the multiple files option? No. After Effects is a pretty smart program. Remember, it's custom made and purpose-built for our pipeline. It understands at its core image sequences. So check it out. Watch what happens when I just do import file. Look at the standard OS dialog box. I'm going to navigate to the folder where all of my animation frames are stored. It's in this Andy's Anim folder. And simply, I'll double click on it. Simply, I'm just going to click. There we go. I'm going to click on the first file. I'm not going to shift select and grab all of them. I'm just going to get numero uno, number one. Okay? Now, if you notice down at the bottom of the OS Finder window, After Effects has already noticed down here that this is a sequence. It scanned the contents of this entire folder, and it's saying, hey, these appear to be in numerical order. I'm going to guess that since they share a common naming convention where the file or with the frame number just adds, as one integer on each frame, I'm going to guess that this is an image sequence. Well, in this case, they're right, okay? So I always just do a good double check to make sure that After Effects is recognizing this as an image sequence, and then I hit import. We just have to select the first frame of our animation, and it's going to import it all together as one. Let's just do it real fast. And then the moment that we hit the OK button, checks it out. Does it load in 60 individual frames? No, it creates what's called an image sequence, where all 60 frames are now saved in this one asset, okay? Now, before we go into some of the other things, we have some problems in here that we need to fix, okay? First and foremost, we have the name of the file. It tells us the type. The size is only a megabyte. Awesome. Reggie. Frame rate. That's a problem for us, right? What should this frame rate be? 24, okay? This was animated at 24 frames a second, and After Effects, given that it's an image sequence, has just kind of guessed, okay? Because an image sequence doesn't have a kind of baked-in frame rate. It's just a folder of images, right? So it's guessing that its frame rate's 30, but it's guessed incorrectly, okay? We need to change how After Effects is interpreting this entire image sequence to get the right frame rate. So there's one small change in here that we need to make. And simply right-clicking on the asset will pop open this contextual menu, and we're going to Interpret Footage, Main, okay? Look at a crazy dialog box. There's a lot of stuff happening in this window here. I know it's overwhelming, but specifically where we're going is frame rate. Assume this frame rate. We don't want 30. What do we want? 24. You got it. So I'm just going to change that to 24 and hit OK. That way, the playback speed of this one specific asset is going to match what we animated and created over in Animate. Okay. All right, so we got a file in. We've ensured that its frame rate is accurate, that it matches the frame rate of what we have over in Animate. But we need to start doing something with this. Okay. Now, in Animate, or maybe even in Photoshop, we have some sort of canvas or a stage, as we're used to seeing it inside of Animate, right? And the stage is where our drawings and our animations really take place. We need to create something very, very similar here in After Effects. Unfortunately, it's not called a stage or a canvas as we're used to seeing in Photoshop. Here in After Effects, it's called a composition. It's fundamentally the exact same thing. It basically creates a frame that has a defined pixel resolution, duration, and frame rate. Let's create our composition. It's really easy to do that. At the top of the screen, there's the composition pull-down menu. And the first choice, new composition. Command-N is a good one to memorize. I'm just going to give this comp a good name, Andy's Anim. And let's look at the properties at the top of our composition settings before we go too much further. Now, the first thing that we need to ensure is set is the width and the height. Over in Animate, we drew all of our drawings at 1280 by 720, so we need to make sure that those numbers gets duplicated over here inside of After Effects. Now, previously in the week, I did this exact same conversation, so I'd already changed this, but you can very quickly, make changes to these values, and it will update. Okay, I'll even update and preserve the aspect ratio between these two values here, which is pretty cool. So we have a 1280 by 720 stage over in Animate, and now we have a 1280 by 720 composition here inside of After Effects. The frame rate is also 24, so we've got to make sure that our assets frame rate's 24, our compositions frame rate's 24, and then there's one more thing that we got to double check at the end, and we got to make sure that the exported video honors that frame rate and keeps it consistent when we export the video over in Media Encoder. Now the rest of the stuff we can just leave alone. There's one thing that we need to change down here at the bottom, and that's the duration. Okay? One of the big differences between After Effects and all the other professional video applications is that our timelines are defined. Okay? We don't have these infinite timelines like we're used to seeing in Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro, or even to a certain degree over in Animate. We have to actually tell the computer how long we want our animations to be. Okay? Now this is the first time that we're probably seeing what's called Simp T Timecode. This is how timecode is read and produced out there in the real world. It's not just frames anymore. Now we're working within a defined system. And let's just kind of talk about what that system is going to look like. Pretty happy. Get to use my new whiteboard right now. Waiting for like 2 years for this whiteboard, right? It's finally arrived. It's the little things that make you extremely happy. I requested it, yeah. But everything works slow as molasses around here. Well, welcome to public education. Things move very, very slow. They do, right? You think our state legislature moves slowly. Welcome to Sacramento City College. We move even slower. Okay, so what we're seeing there in that duration category is something called Simp T Timecode. Okay? Simp T is actually an acronym. So this is what I'm saying, Simp T. Society of Motion Picture Television Engineers. Okay? This is our governing body. They come up with all the broadcast and cinema standards for the entire industry. This one group sets the resolutions, the frame rates, to ensure that everyone's broadcasting at the exact same specification. In the graphic design world, you can kind of basically do whatever the hell you want to do, right? But in the video and the film world, we have regulations and specifications that we are required to use to ensure that our imagery shows up correctly on a television screen, okay? Because broadcasters can't just do whatever the hell they want to do. They all have to be working within the exact same specifications. So they set the spec, okay? And they've come up with a structure for our time code. That's what it looks like. going to see this all over the place. A good indication that you're working with a professional application is when they start showing stuff in Simp T Timecode. Okay, you're going to see timecode all over the place, so we got to get used to seeing it today. Okay, now there's a pattern here. Has anyone figured out the pattern? You got it. So the first 0 is hours. This next set is minutes. Seconds is the third set, and the final second, it's not milliseconds. What is it? I wish it was nanoseconds. That'd be pretty great, right? It's actually just frames. Okay, frames. So this is the one part that's kind of common between the stuff that we've been doing and the pro stuff. Okay, so this is our structure. We have to follow this format. It's really easy. Once you start to kind of understand it, it goes pretty fast. Okay, it's a really flexible time code system that gets us all kind of on the same marker or ruler system. That's what time code really is. It's just a ruler system for time. Okay. Here in After Effects, of course, we can set the duration using this system. So if I wanted to have my animation be 30 seconds, how would I change it? How would it read if I wanted my timeline to have 30 seconds? Yeah, so it'd be 0:00:30:00. Okay. Yeah, you got to have the entire set in there for it to work. You can't add and subtract. You have to have all 4 sets of numbers in here. Okay. So get comfortable working with inside this system. You're going to see it all over the place. Okay, not just After Effects, just basically everywhere. In addition, a lot of folks, they see this start time code and they get confused. They go, why in the world would I want to change my start time code? Doesn't everything start at 0? No, often it doesn't start at 0. Okay. I worked at a film studio here in town before I started teaching, and I did a ton, and I mean a ton of commercial work, right? I did motion graphics and animations for car companies, paint companies, just about every company in the greater Sacramento area that did a commercial that, I did all the motion graphics for. And when you're producing an animation that's going to be broadcast, your time code that actually shows up on the tape, okay? I'm kind of dating myself. We don't do anything on tapes anymore, right? We just give KCRA or Channel 10 a digital file. But even then, the time code has to be there, and the time code has to be correct, right? We want in most broadcast environments, right? We want to have our time code start at 1, at exactly hour 1, right? Which will allow us to do what's called a pre-roll. So you have 10 seconds of black, 10 seconds of an Academy slate, 10 seconds of black, the countdown timer. Okay, you guys know that. You guys have seen the countdown timer for it goes 8, 7, 7. There's a purpose for that. Okay, and that comes in. We want that on our timeline right before our animation starts. So you have to create timelines that actually start at. Well, you get to determine when you want your time code to start. But point being is that we often change it. We often change it to facilitate how this asset is going to be integrated into a much larger system. Here's another great example. At that same film studio, probably like one of the last big projects I did was a 6-part miniseries called California Prisons Under Pressure. And it was a docu-series all about the current state of the California prison system. And it was a massive project, big-time documentary. It was sponsored by the CCPOA, which is the California Peace Officers Association. It's the union for all the peace officers. And it was a really good insider's look as the current state of things in the prison system here in California, right? And I was the lead editor on it, so I did all the video editing, I did all the animation, and I was kind of managing all the data, right? Because this is a 6-part video series, and each episode was an hour long, or almost an hour long, with commercial breaks and what have you, right? So we had, how many assets, video clips do you think we had for a 6-part video series? Anyone want to take a guess? We had over 7,000 individual things that we now had to manage, right? Individual video clips, sound effects, movie files, animations that I did. We had a ton of data that we had to manage. We were actually gifted this great library of resources. This is our taxpayer dollars at work, which is kind of great. The state of California paid for a whole bunch of video producers and cinematographers to go to each of the prisons inside of California and basically do B-roll. Just kind of like behind the scenes footage. That's all it was, just B-roll footage of the inmates, the guards, the administrators, kind of doing their daily business. And the state of California gave us access to this library. And I think we had like 300 hours of video footage from this collection that we then ingested into our system. We clipped it out, organized it. So we had to have a system to allow us to organize our data pretty quickly, right? It's not just going to go into a whole big folder and hope for the best, right? When you're working at scale, timecode now becomes a really big tool for us because we can change the timecode, right? We can alter it. For me, I came up with a really great system that allowed us to organize things almost instantaneously. Every time a camera operator, a cinematographer was walking out the door, I grabbed them. And I said, okay, on your cameras, set your time code for every interview that you do, okay? Because they were going out and interviewing, administrators and advocates and watchdog organizations. They were doing a lot of interviews, right? And I told them, every interview you do, please make sure you set your time code on your cameras, because pro-level cameras, not like iPhones, okay? When you're working with 10th, these things can't change time code, nor will they actually produce actual Simp T Timecode, okay? But pro-level cameras will. And you can set it. I said every interview needs to start with on hour 1. Okay? Whenever you shoot B-roll, which is kind of like behind the scenes footage, if you will, right? When you shoot B-roll, change your time code to 2. Okay? All the motion graphics and the animation that I created started with 3. All the voiceover recordings for our narrators, we had their time code started at 4. I think all our sound effects started with 5, the music started at 6, and so when I had over 7,000 individual files on our server, I just sorted by timecode, and I could see the chunks of data pretty quickly. If I needed to find an interview, I can just grab all the block ones, all the hour 1 clips, and I can start finding pretty quickly, based on our naming conventions, the stuff that I was looking for. It was a great way for us to very quickly organize our data. So timecode is more than just kind of a ruler marker on our timelines, right? It actually can be a very big organizational tool as well. So we should use it. All right, let's get back to animating. Goodbye, lovely whiteboard. I love that it rolls too. That makes me happy. I can even turn it over. I don't know why I'd turn it over, but I can. Anyways, all right. Okay, so I think I'm going to have my animation, well, pop quiz. How many seconds is this animation? 5 seconds. Okay, so I'll leave it as this. And I want to leave my background color just a white, just for temporary. Okay, so once you hit OK, now After Effects kind of hums to life a little bit. Okay, a couple things have changed. You can see that our timeline now becomes active. We have the ability to start adding things quickly to our timeline. In addition, our viewer in the center part of our interface also starts to come to life a little bit, and we're starting to create a stage that we can now start placing assets into, okay? So let's go ahead and start doing this, okay? It's pretty easy. What you're going to find downstairs in your timeline is an environment that's really not all that dissimilar from the timelines that we're used to seeing over in Animate. It's going to be a layered-based timeline, exactly like Animate. So what's on top is always going to block out what's below, right? We can turn the visibility off, the quality off. There's a lot of settings in here that will allow us to very, very quickly produce some really good high-quality results. How are we going to get my image sequence asset? Yeah, so here's my asset, or excuse me, here's my composition. Yeah, and this is how easy it is to work inside of After Effects. I need to get this asset, this image sequence, downstairs and here into my timeline. It really is as simple as dragging and dropping. There it is. Ta-da! Now we have a little bit of a problem here. Where's my animation? I see some red lines in there, which is something, but where's my animation? It's transparent. The background's transparent. Let's go back over to Animate for a second and look at this. Okay, so here's the original. The outline of the character is black. The background is white. When we export content from Animate, the stage color, which in our case is white, is going to show up as transparent. Okay, in the image sequences that we create. An important distinction, a very important distinction. Okay, so anything that's white is going to show up as transparent. Okay, now I'm over here in my Properties tab. You can see that this is my stage color. So whatever this color is, that's going to show up as transparent. Doesn't matter if it, doesn't matter if it's green, it's always going to be invisible, transparent when we bring it back over into animate. So we got to add a couple things here. Let's put it back to white. We have to add something in our timeline over here in After Effects to get some colors, to get opaque pixels, because we always want to have opaque pixels in the background. We never want to have transparent pixels in the background. Okay, so we need to add a new layer into the mix here, because I want to be able to see Andy's rock monster. Now, much like we added a composition at the top of the screen, we can also add layers. Okay, I want to add a new layer, and simply for today, since this is day one, we're going to add in a solid layer. This is going to be a rasterized bitmap layer, and it's just going to be a solid color. That's all it is. Okay, that way we have some content in the background of our scene, which will allow us to see our artwork. Okay, so we wanted to match the composition size. You can also hit Make Comp Size if you're not sure what the numbers are. We want it to be white, so we'll hit OK, and poof. Okay, now we have a white image. But still, the problem remains. Where's our artwork? Where's our animation? Behind it, yeah. So this exact same layering that we're used to seeing over in Animate is alive and kicking here inside of After Effects. Whatever's on top is going to block whatever's underneath it. Right now, my white solid's on top. I want to see through to Andy's animation underneath it. So what's the solution to my problem? You got it. I'm going to reorder the layers. And as you guys were both saying, just dragging it around. Yep, drag the layers to to the location that we want. Drag. Oof, there it is. And then we can see the foot of Andy's animation coming in over there. Mission accomplished. Okay? All right. If you're following along, has anyone stumbled on how to play our animation? It's actually the space bar. There it goes. Now, why did it go white? Right there. The animation ended. The clip ended, okay? So we have the duration of our overall timeline, but if you look very carefully on layer number 1 here, which are the animation frames for Andy's rock monster, it also has a local duration, okay? So this is as long as that animation image sequence is inside the larger kind of context of our timeline. Now, I'm free to make some changes to that if I wanted to. And this is kind of neat. Check it out. Maybe I want my animation to start at 1 second, right here. Well, if you click in the middle of a clip, I now can move that clip in time. So now, what am I expected to see in here? Nothing, or just white. And then once my playhead gets the endpoint of that clip, the animation begins. Okay? It's pretty cool. We can also change when, we can also change the endpoint of my animation. If you notice very directly here, Andy's animation goes back and then it goes forward. Well, what if I want to have that frame, or let's find the contact. Right, let's just pretend. Maybe I want to have that frame be the first frame that we see in the clip itself. We now have to trim the endpoint of our animation to the location of our playhead, and we can do that, but I'm not going to click in the center of the bar. Watch what happens when I put my cursor at the end of the bar. See, it goes to the left and right? I can just drag it over there. Now, when I hit the space bar, it's going to start at that new endpoint. We can do the same thing for the out point as well if we wanted to trim the ends. I'll hit undo, get that back. Okay, so let's keep cruising here. So this is starting to look pretty great. I'm pretty happy with the result that I've gotten here. However, I have a 5-second long composition, right? but the contents is only, just about 2.5, okay, 60 frames or so. I don't want to export out 2.5 seconds of white, okay? I only want to export out this chunk in here. So how could I get rid of all of this mumbo jumbo? Yeah, so we can adjust. Well, we're going to adjust the endpoint of what's called the work area, okay? Because right now, when we hit the space bar, the computer is playing back the entire timeline. Let's check it out real quick. There's the animation, and then we have 2.5 seconds of white, and then it'll loop back to the beginning. Well, what if I don't want to have that 2.5 seconds of white at the end? Well, that's where the work area comes in. This little blue bar here adjusts the work area. And the work area is basically going to define the range of frames the playback engine is going to evaluate. So, check it out. If I continue to adjust the out point of our work area to right there, watch what happens now when I hit the space bar. As soon as it gets to that out point, it starts. So we don't necessarily have to go back into our composition settings and trim our composition duration to what we need it to be. The work area allows us to make a selection, if you will, inside of the timeline of our composition, and then only playback or export that area. Neat, huh? Pretty cool. All right. So one of the great added benefits of coming into After Effects is that we get to ensure that we're getting a defined playback play rate, frames per second. Okay. After Effects does an excellent job of maintaining a consistent playback rate. Animate, good for the first couple weeks in this class, very bad for the remainder of this class, right? Because we want to make sure that what we're animating at 24 frames per second actually shows up as 24 frames a second in our video file, okay? After Effects is going to ensure that we do this because the video playback engine in After Effects is top notch. It really is best in class. It's wonderful, okay? It's never going to play your timeline faster than the frame rate. At times it'll go a little bit slower, but that's only during playback. On export, the video file that you produce is going to be at that defined frames per second. All right. So I tell you what, now's a really good, excellent time for a break. How about we just take a small little break for 5 or so minutes. We'll come back in and we'll take a look at how we can export this out and produce a file that we can now upload to Canvas or Facebook or YouTube, wherever we want to go. Sound good? All right. All right, so we've been spending our time just getting things into After Effects and getting a little bit more comfortable in this new work environment, right? Luckily for us, it's not too radically different than what we're used to seeing over inside of Animate. One of the big differences is getting our content out of After Effects, okay? However, there's one small thing that we need to do first, okay? And I always like to do this just kind of by practice. Sometimes you get a little bit of motion blur on your animated frames. We're going to be talking about in the future how to really ingrain a tremendous amount of motion blur into our animation frames. One of the hallmarks of stop motion animation, whether it be an animated drawing or traditional stop motion animation with puppets, is that motion blur is completely absent. When you photograph a moving object, the object in movement is going to create these wonderful motion trails. I'm sure you've seen this in the photographs that you've taken and that you've seen, right? It's a naturally occurring effect, right? The shutter speed of the camera isn't being closed quick enough to capture the movement as a still, so we're getting this lovely motion trail behind it, right? We don't get that in stop motion animation. We don't get it at all, right? Because every image that we take a picture of is always static. It's never actually in movement. The combined effort, if you will, of all these images creates the illusion of movement, but they're not actually moving. So we need to look to add motion blur as we go forward. One of the added benefits of working inside of After Effects is that we'll be able to add some motion blur in as we go along the way, which is going to make our images, our animations feel more cinematic and more photographic. So we'll be looking at a lot of these sliders and what have you. We're also going to take an examination of the effects and presets palette, which is really our back door into the entire powerful effects engine inside of After Effects. I really can't recommend you exploring this app enough. It's a deep app. I've been working in After Effects since, oh boy, since version 4, I think. Okay. And that was probably way back in 1999, somewhere right around in there, okay? And I'm still learning things in After Effects. It's that deep of an application. This rabbit hole goes pretty deep, so you can't learn enough about it. It's something that's going to be a common force inside of the animation world, so the more exposure and experience, the better. So let's talk about how we're going to get our stuff out of After Effects, because we're going to get a small amount of motion blur just from the playback engine itself. This is kind of one of the small little added benefits of coming into After Effects is that it's going to do some legit frame blending, okay? Animate fundamentally was not doing that when it was exporting GIFs out, okay? GIF format doesn't even consider that as part of its video format. Well, it's not even a video format, it's just it's going to run a lot, and it's going to look smoother too. It's not going to feel as clicky, okay? In the future, in the upcoming weeks, in the future, we'll talk about how we can enhance the illusion of motion blur very directly. We're not going to do that today because I don't want to overwhelm you guys on day one. Today is just all about getting stuff in and then getting stuff out. So we've brought some stuff in, we've put it in our timeline, we put a solid color layer behind our animation frames to start producing that wonderful white background. Now we need to start adding or exporting all of this jazz out of After Effects and get it into a video format that we now can upload to YouTube, upload it to Facebook and the web, a common video format, okay? Let's just do it real fast. It's really, really easy. There's a couple things that we need to ensure we do first before we go any further. I always like to select the composition inside of my project bin to export. This is a great way to direct After Effects to export just the comp that we want it to export out. So with our composition selected inside of the bin, we can go to the top of the screen where it says File, and then believe it or not, we're just doing Export, and then Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. Okay? Adobe Media Encoder is another app. Welcome to being a professional. The training wheels are off, by the way, right? You're no longer beginner students, you're now professional animators. And in the professional world, like I said, we have about 6 or 7 apps that we have to be masters of. It's not just one thing. Adobe Media Encoder is another purpose-built application. Does anyone know what Media Encoder does? Just compresses video. It's a one-trick pony. Okay, that's all it does. It takes video frames and it compresses them into a very, very, very specific distribution codec. Okay, luckily for us, we're going to be working with a standard video codec. It's the default. Excuse me. All right. And it's pretty easy to use. So all we got to do is just click on it, Adobe Media Encoder is another big app. It's going to launch in the background of our frame. Well, eventually it'll launch. Hello, did I hit cancel? I have a good track record of doing that. There we go. Now it's launching. You can see the icon pop in inside the dock. It's going. It's launched. It's a big app. It's kind of like the Battlestar Galactica. It takes a long time to get started. Huh? Just bring it into After Effects. Is going to make. Yeah. Well, it's not going to make. Let's get on the same page. Okay. The animation, we're going to get motion blur, so the frames are going to start getting blended together a little bit. It's not going to make the actual drawing smoother. That's up to you. That's your job, right? Yeah. No. The drawings are still the drawings. You got to do all that, right? Okay. So over here in Adobe Media Encoder, now it looks like I hit the button twice. I want to subtract that one. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so check it out. Even says After Effects, Andy's Anim. That's the name of the composition that I created over in After Effects. So it's pulling all of that video information over here into Encoder, and it's applying the default codec, which is H.264. Okay. Now the H.264 codec, this is kind of like an algorithm, if you will. It's a language for the video file, and this is the default language, if you will, for all videos on the web. Doesn't matter if you're uploading to YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, everything goes into the H.264 codec. It's wonderful, okay? This has been the web standard for video files for about 10 years, okay? And it's really, really good. They actually just came out with H.265 last year, so we're going to be upgrading. The H.264 standard does an excellent job at 1080p video. It does a really good job at 4K video, but the new standard, 265, does an even better job of handling 4K video, which is the current standard for broadcasters. Okay. So there's a couple things in here that we need to look at. Here's the codec. You can actually click on the little link. Come on. No, I don't want to do the dynamic link server, but yeah, you can start loading the presets. Most importantly, we just got to make sure we know where we're saving it. That's where this output file goes to. Let's give it a good name. I want to put it right there on my desktop and hit save. Okay. Now we haven't really done anything until we hit the play button up here. Let's go ahead and start the encode. We'll get a little preview thumbnail down here at the bottom. For a 2.5 second animation, this should go pretty fast. We're pretty fortunate that, and there it is, it's done. Media Encoder is a really great encoder. Like I said, it's a one-trick pony. All it does is going to crunch the number and compress video files into something that's pretty manageable, very small, but it retains almost all the qualities. There's my animation. Whee! Wonderful. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Now let's do an apples-to-apples comparison here. So this file that we just created went through the After Effects loop. Okay? We exported from Animated, we imported into After Effects, and then we exported from After Effects, right? And this is the file that we got. Let's return just for 1 second and export a GIF from Animate and compare the quality and the differences between the two, because we'll be able to see them pretty directly inside of the file. So here we are back in Animate. Let's export out an animated GIF. All right. GIFs are super compressed, by the way. There's the define. You only get 256 colors. I think that's the limit. Yeah, 256 colors, which is horrible. I mean, it really is a god-awful video format. I'm actually kind of surprised that GIFs are still around. I mean, I remember when they first came out in the mid to early 90s, and they quickly died because they were pretty pointless, okay? Better formats came out pretty quickly, specifically Flash. Flash came out. Do you guys remember Flash? Maybe date myself to a certain degree. Well, the Flash is a web platform that's authored in what was called Macromedia Flash originally. Then Adobe bought Macromedia, and it turned into Adobe Flash, and now it's Adobe Animate. But Flash used to be a web platform. It kind of replaced the GIFs, but somehow GIFs just kind of hung around, right? Now they're taking over our phones, which is maybe not great. I don't know. The destruction of the human English written language can be all thanks to the GIF, right? I can't tell you how many times a student has emailed me a GIF as a reply, and I go, "Are you kidding me?" This is not how we communicate in a professional setting. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox for the day. Let me just save it out. All right. So here's the MP4 from Animate, or from Adobe Media Encoder. Now, I'm going to try something here. This is never going to work. See you later. Yeah, okay. So the video file on the left, there we go. The one on the left is from After Effects. The one on the right is from Animate. If you notice very carefully, the one from Animate, well, it's at a different frame rate. It's not adopting, it's not preserving the frame rate that we set, okay? So the one over on the left is at 24 frames a second. Great job, exactly what we want, okay? It also looks a little bit smoother too, okay? It doesn't feel as clicky to me. Yeah, it's a little bit faster because it's not adopting the correct frame rates. It's going to get it close. I think it almost defaults to 30, and I think a lot of that comes from the web browser's understanding of the playback speed for GIFs. Point being, in our world, in the professional animation world, we want to get out of that GIF format pretty quickly and into a professional video format that's going to maintain the frame rate. Yeah? Okay. It's up to you. I think you know, what I'm seeing in the left one is that everything looks a little bit blurred, okay? Doesn't feel as clicky as it's going between each one of the animation frames. When you get it out into a video, there's going to be some frame blending that happens in between each frame. We're not getting that with the GIF. All right. So there's a purpose behind this, and now we have a true video file that we then can send over to our video app. I can send it to a compositor. I can set it into, you know, a professional setting, and no one's going to laugh at me, right? And we certainly don't want that. You guys work hard in your animations. I want everyone in your future to take you seriously. The fastest way to get treated like an amateur is to hand someone an AVI file or a Windows media file. They're gonna. That's not going to go well for you. All right, questions on this sequence. This is a sequence that we're going to be using going forward, okay? Nothing's going to be a GIF anymore. On all projects going forward, you're going to be turning in a .mp4, and you're going to use this system, okay? In addition, we're going to expand upon our repertoire, if you will, of After Effects awesomeness. This is just day one. We're just talking about I/O, inputs and outputs today. But in the future, we're going to do titling, okay? Simple like fade to blacks and all that jazz. Music, sound effects. We're going to incorporate other shots and other effects. So our role, and if we have time, and I don't know if we're going to have time to do this, we're even going to start talking about character animation in After Effects, because there's some great puppet tools in After Effects that will allow us to do some pretty fun things, okay? We're going to actually do some animating in After Effects, which is pretty great, okay? So it's going to be a pretty great tool going forward. I hope that you really begin to use it. You know, it's one that I know that you're going to use in every single moment of your professional careers. Okay. All right. So for this week, for our homework assignment, you're going to be making a run. Let's just go look at the run for a second. Of course, naturally, you're free to make your animation frames in whatever application you find is more comfortable for you. I really encourage you to, at the very least, prototype and animate. That way you can get a good playback, right? You can understand how these poses are working together to create the illusion of this character running. But if you wanted to send those over to Photoshop and then create a really nice sketch on top of it, I say rock and roll, man. I think it's a great, great idea, okay? The power and the purpose behind Animate is just so we can get a nice timeline, so we can see how these frames work together to create this illusion. But for a run, our illusion is going to be a little bit different. Now, if you turn to 177 in the book, you're going to see a lot of different run examples. Much like we did with the walk cycle, the first thing that we need to zero in on is the tempo. Now, when I say tempo, what should be the first thing you think about? What's another word for tempo? Time or speed, right? tempo, speed, how fast and how slow the movement's going to be. And we saw this in action for our walk cycle. How many frames did we use to communicate one step in our walk cycle? 12, right? 12 frames per step. Now, we did a 24-frame walk cycle, so how many steps did we complete? 2. Okay. Now, for us over here inside of the run world, okay, our tempo is going to be a whole lot faster. Okay. Now we're basically doing a 13-frame cycle versus a 24 or 25-frame cycle. Okay. Now, if you start to break down all of these poses, there's some landmarks in here that we need to look at. Some big picture ideas that we need to ensure that we include in our drawings to produce the illusion that someone is in fact running. Okay. Just very quickly looking at the illustrations, what can you tell me are some of the important landmarks that we need to make sure that we add? Say again? Yeah, so we're, if you look very carefully, 1 foot is touching the ground, okay? And we even have a couple frames up here by the peak pose where no feet are touching the ground. Some people would say that runs are a whole series of controlled jumps, very, very fast, okay? Because there's a couple frames right in here where our feet are fundamentally both off of the ground, where we are leaping between the different feet, okay? So that's an important indication, something to consider, that one foot's going to be on the ground and the other one's either going to be up, or on the peak pose, both feet are going to be up. Another landmark to keep in mind is look at the back. In our walk cycle, the plane of our character was pretty upright for the most part. For the run, look at the back. It's pretty angled forward. Now we're leaning into our run, okay? If, you can't run like this. Oh, I'm sure you could. You wouldn't be going very fast, right? But if we're really sprinting, we're going to rotate our hips forward a little bit, which is going to increase the angle of our back and give us a really nice, good sense of forward kinetic movement. Your character is going to feel like they're running, believe it or not, more from the angle of the back than the poses on the leg, okay? So prototype this. Experiment with a different angle. Do a couple frames where you change the angle of the back and see how it gives you a different feeling of how fast or how slow your character is showing up inside the actual movements themselves, okay? Another important hallmark of a run are the arms, okay? Now just look very quickly at this artist's illustration of the arms. What can you tell me? How does it look? Yeah, he's kind of punching, right? If you think about it, in a walk, our arms are kind of doing this for a walk. Just kind of swinging down low, right? But for a run, do we have any runners in here that have done some running, like on a team or anything? Beyond runs away after class. I like it. That counts. That counts. Sure, why not?
It's going to be in the military, too.
Yeah? You're going to go in the military?
He does a lot of running.
All right, rock and roll. What branch?
Army.
Army. Hooah. I come from a military family, so I'm very close to that community. That's great.
Very muscular.
What are you going to do in the Army? Do you have a job yet? Not yet? All right, rock and roll. Just curious. But if you look at the run, it's very different from a walk when it comes to the arms, okay? The arms were down for the walk, hanging, almost like lifeless pendulums. Didn't really have a role in our sense of locomotion when it came to creating the illusion of a walk. But for a run, the arms are actually part of the movement itself. Now they're pumping and really propelling ourselves forward inside of our three-dimensional space. They're up almost the entire time. The extreme poses, they're down just for 1 frame as we go through frame 4, our passing position, okay? Other than that, they're up. So they're up here, and then they quickly cycle like this. Quick, pause, 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 quick, pause, 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 quick, okay? That passing position, they're down only for a couple frames, and then they're back up here for the remainder. There's a little bit of movement in there too, but there's not much movement. That quick movement gives us the illusion that we're being propelled or like flung forward, okay? So that's something we absolutely want to make sure is included in our run, okay? So look, they're up, they're up, they're up, up, and then they're down. And then they're back up, 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 up. So on 3 and 4 is really where the arms do most of their movement. For the remainder of the cycle, they're up, okay? Something that's very different, very different. Now, some common elements between the walk cycle and the run that we absolutely need to make sure that we infuse, okay? Still got some contact poses. Look at the contact poses. The heel is doing something very, very similar in the contact poses as they were in the walk, right? Still the contact pose where the heel is striking the ground, making contact with good old Mother Earth. Same with frame 7 over there on the other contact, okay? Look at the down pose, facilitating a very, very similar pose, okay? The hips are at the lowest. They're down. We're compressing the spring. Then up we go, just like we did on the walk, okay? The poses are different, but for the waist down, they're similar. We can extrapolate, okay? So this is our assignment this week. 13 frames, a complete run cycle. You can draw a new character if you'd like. You can continue drawing the character that you did last week. I think that's fine. I'm not going to force you guys to make something new, but we're doing 13 drawings this week for our little run cycle. Sound good? Everyone confident, clear, understanding what it is that we are here to do. What do you mean?
Like, you know, in walk cycle part 1, you're supposed to look at general,
like a block, yeah. I would start off with the block, right, and then draw on top of it to give us something like what you're doing there. That's fine. Yep. I think literally blocking things out is an excellent, excellent strategy.
I mean, like, something like that.
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, it can look however it is that you want your character to look. It could be Mickey Mouse for all I care. You could do Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse would be a fun character to animate. Except his ears. Have you guys ever noticed his ears are always flat and perpendicular? Yeah. Iconic. Doesn't matter how he rotates his head, his ears are always in the exact same spot, right? Because they're always trying to create that iconic Mickey Mouse shape. Because think about it. If you have 2 discs on the top of your head, you wouldn't see the discs if you rotated this way to camera. Now the discs are gone, or they're just going to show up as 2 lines. So they intentionally draw them. So no matter how he rotates his heads, his ears are always in the exact same pose. He kind of breaks reality very quickly. But when you're the franchise icon, you kind of have to do it, right? All right, let's get to work. Let's do it.